Welcome back. Arvinda is back from Portugal, where he was judging their national wine competition. That's got to be tough. He's going to tell us about Portuguese wine and why he thinks it's going to be the next big thing in the industry. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I talk a lot about the diversity that exists in Italy, and I mean Italy has over 540 different grape varieties that have been identified to produce wine, but Portugal is actually not that far behind. In Portugal, there's over 250 grape varieties that are used to produce wine, and so people tend to be familiar with names like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and everything else. But with Portugal, there's so many native grape varieties that exist, and it's really interesting because I mean Portugal is very regional. And and it's a small country, but there's a lot of different regions, and in those regions there's a lot of diversity in terms of the soil conditions and the microclimates. And as a result of that, you have these different grapes that grow well in different areas. And there's a bit of a map of Portugal and some of the different regions. But it's interesting to me because every time I go to Portugal, I'm so impressed with the quality that exists there.
Of the wine.
Of the wines, absolutely. And Portugal, to me, has some of the best values in terms of price-quality ratio, and in all price points. So whether it's the lower price point, or the medium price point, or the higher-end price points, the wines just, to me, seem such great value for whatever dollar you're paying. And so I really believe that Portuguese wines will be the next big thing over the next decade or so. And the interesting thing is, why haven't they done that yet? And I think part of it is, the names of some of the grapes are unfamiliar to people, like Encruzado or Touriga Nacional. And so sometimes, they're difficult to say, they're difficult to understand. Sometimes, as with Italian wines, the grape variety isn't necessarily on the bottle because it's the region or the style of wine.
Okay.
So there's an unfamiliarity there. But also, there's a lot of blends in Portugal. So again, people don't necessarily aren't familiar with those different types of wines. But I think with Portuguese producers, they really need to start to focus in on these indigenous native grape varieties, because that's what really makes their wines unique and different and separates them from all the generic mass stuff that you find on the shelves everywhere.
So even though people wouldn't necessarily know it or recognize it, that's their way to get in.
Absolutely, absolutely, because people are starting to more and more look for things that are unique.
Yes.
And whether it be on the food side of things or whether it be on the wine side of things, people want to know, because wine should tell a story about where it's from, right? It should have that sense of place. And one of the other reasons why I think Portuguese wines really haven't made it out there compared to, say, France or Italy is with immigration. When the French and the Italians immigrated to North America, there was a lot of French restaurants and Italian restaurants that popped up, and that gave a venue for French and Italian wines. But there's really not a lot of Portuguese restaurants out there. So there really wasn't a lot of spots where, Portuguese wines could have an easy entry. That's starting to change a little bit, but more importantly, I think because of the quality that's being produced, you really can't ignore it anymore. I mean, these wines are just that good. And the Portuguese producers are starting to focus more on the indigenous grape varieties. But they're also starting to get away from chasing the market, because too often producers think that, okay, let's blend our native grapes with grapes that people are familiar with, like Cabernet or Syrah or Merlot. And what tends to happen is you end up kind of covering up and overwhelming
the really
character.
good flavor.
Exactly. And so they're getting away from that and focusing more on the native grape varieties. But the other is they're starting to get away from chasing style. So a lot of people in Europe think that the North American palate likes a certain style. And so a lot of producers are making over-oaked, over-extracted, over-ripe wines because they think that people in North America like those styles of wines. And they're starting to back off that, because when you do that, you cover up, again, all sense of character of the wine itself. And so they're getting back to actually showcasing the vineyard site and the terroir and the grape varieties in the wines, and now that flavor is really starting to come out, that character is really starting to come out, and people are starting to recognize it now. So it's a really great thing. So I mean, one of the things that is really important, I think, is for people when they go in to look for wines that are made with indigenous grape varieties in Portugal.
So what are some of those?
Well, some of those, like, for example, I mean, in the north in Vinho Verde, I mean, Loureiro, which is a very floral, very pretty white wine, really nice. Alvarinho, which is rich and minerally and peach and citrus character to it.
Can you compare these to something? Like for someone that, say, would really enjoy a Pinot Grigio, this would be more your style. Like, can you do that,
in
or
some
no?
ways, yes. Some ways, it's hard to necessarily compare grape varieties because they're so different.
Right.
But stylistically, you can compare. So, I mean, the white wines up in Vinho Verde tend to be very fresh and minerally and crisp. So, people who like that style of wine look for those type of wines. And again, sometimes it's difficult because the grape varieties might not necessarily be on the label. But that's why it's important to go talk to people that are knowledgeable. So, I mean, some other grapes that people should look for, Touriga Nacional and Touriga Franca, which are two red grapes. And Touriga Nacional is such a pretty wine. I mean, it's got really floral aromas to it, but it's rich and it has a really good structure to it. Touriga Franca tends to be very dark and firm and also rich. The Dow area in Portugal, I think, is making some of the best value wines in the world. Just absolutely stunning wines, great character from grapes like Alfrochero, which tends to be dark and has spicy, like a little bit of mint and currant flavors to it. There's a white grape in this area called Encruzado, and it could be very mouth-filling and very rich, but also very minerally, and ages really well. Very, very cool wine. And in the Bairrada area, there's this absolutely phenomenal red grape called Baga. And Baga tends to be very rich and dense and fruity, has really bright acidity to it, and it makes not only great red still wines, but they make some phenomenal red sparkling wines that are just so cool and fresh. Yeah,
that sounds great.
Yeah, so people really need to, I think, go explore Portugal a little bit more, and it's not scary, and, you know, taste a bunch of stuff, and just because it's not familiar to a palate doesn't mean it's not good. You know, you need to taste a few.
Thank you so much, Gurvinder. That was great. So for great wines, check out Unwind. Go to vinomaniawines.com/seasonal-selections, or you can follow Gurvinder on Twitter at Edmonton Wine Guy.